to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather and meet today, Camberwell people, and pay my respects and our respects to elders past and present. Now, a couple of the classic housekeeping. If you do get the bathrooms, they're out the door. Any fire emergency, we've got 2 fire exits in the room. I feel a little bit like an nurse right now, pointing at everything. Please feel free to help yourselves to food at the back of the room and tea, coffee if you need. We do know that people do need to leave sometimes to get back to the office or to get to the meeting. Perfectly understand. So again, exit through the back. Everything we do today will be recorded and will be available on our social media and our website as well. So if you do miss anything that you want to catch up on, you can catch that later. And just very quickly before we start, on your tables, look of a flyer that talks about our global retail sentiment. So we're just launching that this morning. Fantastic if you could take part. This is with our global consultancy group, Little Tough Group. So we are collecting data from retail CEOs around the world. And as a thanks to those that participate, we're sharing the data with you first and foremost. And we will welcome you back to our breakfast in June and when we talk about results as well. So if you could take 5 minutes at some in the time when you need a break, take the QR code, scan it, and we'd love to hear your thoughts about what you think retail is going to do in 2023. Fantastic. So moving on, I'd like to welcome Brian Walker, CEO of Retail Doctor Group, to start and welcome our speakers.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for attending and joining us. I'm the 22nd Presentation CEO event. It's delighted to have you with us and delighted to have both very excellent joining. I'm Mike. Fantastic audience, fantastic speakers. So let's get on. I think it's a start point, and especially I'll just share a few slides and move it through. It's interesting, you know, everyone talking about this transformative state of retail. We thought we'd just have a bit of a look at what it might even look like in 5 to 8 years' time if you're a customer. And as you know, in our business, we're very much customer insights, market insights, defining strategy, along with capability and culture. So this is Patrick. Patrick one day decides he's going to chat with the retailer's avatar. The assistant reviews his needs, makes a recommendation, hopefully doesn't offer a discount. He moves into this frictionless commerce space where the order is placed through his in this case, it's on the retail social media. He then comes on to the retailer's website, which shows the product select. That's all fairly straightforward, and we're doing that. And then, of course, he has his virtual try-ons for his shirts, his sizes, all his details are known, projected through. 3D body scan is in place. He then has a look on the metaverse and looks at how his avatar looks. So he's got a virtual glimpse while he's in the physical reality. And of course, then he pays, in this example, by cryptocurrency. Now, of course, we like to see him come into the physical environment for the consummation of the experience and so forth. But what it's really starting to say is a different way going forward. And we'll bring it back into today. But I just wanted to sort of share with some thoughts. We know, and projections are showing us, that Australian in-store retail channel will come to about 490 billion in 2030. It's currently at about 370. We'll see 20% of total retail sales on average in online, if you like. By the way, increasingly, we'll talk less and less about channels. We'll talk about the brand, of course. But it's interesting to see the mix as it moves well over 113 billion. The generational change is interesting, not just in consumers, of course, but in leaders, but in resources, organizations. We're always looking at this position of what will your future build be? What will your succession be? And what skill sets will you need to be thinking about? And how will you speak to these segments of the market? And both Bernie and Michael will talk, no doubt, about the way that they attract these new spending demographics. Environmentalism is a huge concern. We see it loudly in all our insights work with Gen Z and millennials. And this interesting piece about most products by 2030 purchase will be sustainable. We talked at one point about e-commerce, of course, mobile commerce, now social commerce. Currently, 0.4 sales. Retail offline, and that is a dramatic change from 5 to 7 years ago, where it was all about shop on every corner. Now we have to think in a much more virtual way, a much more kaleidoscopic around customer activity, and we need to think about our coverage. One of the buzzwords we like to use, or one of the terms we think about with a retailer, is what is their coverage? Again, we start to talk about the Internet of Everything, or all things. 2020, we had 25 internet users. We expect that to grow on a trajectory of at least 20% growth. And the future shop windows are. So one of the pieces to think about from the distribution space is, how do we use physical space in stores? We want to build experience. We want to build a much more consumptive experience for our customers. How do we use physical space? So we'll see a lot more thinking around future shop windows, a lot more thinking, our friends at Rebel with their in-store displays, activity, participation. But if I could think of my store as a 24/7 beacon, what would that mean? And we saw some really interesting work with Adidas in Nuremberg, where their high street stores, you touch the window and it's a full interactive screen. You can do that at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. It recognizes you, it knows you. And of course, you're part of their database. Drone delivery, it's space growth, of course, well known, but we think that certainly supply channel economics, supply chain logistics, will be very much influenced by artificial intelligence and technology such as drones. We're looking at Australia spending about 3.6 billion on artificial intelligence systems in 2025. And what's interesting, when we talk to industry experts in this particular space, they talk about conscious learning. So their prediction is in 5 years, we will have machines that can think. And when we start to have that, highly repetitive tasks start to become, I suppose, ultimately obsolete. So when you start to think about conscious intelligence, you start to see the very permutation of what retail is, consumers, society is, and the changes that will bring. Oh, and of course, for our friends looking at the resale market, it's at 11 times faster than traditional retail. And again, we see numbers as that shows us. So what are some of the key trends? Anastasia, you're going to share this, are we?
Yes.
We'll jump in.
One of the trends that we have seen is a rise to come back is that consumers have really got a lot of patience. They're realistic now and they want to think on their terms. So around 77% of millennials, she's saying that it's got to save them time. They're looking now as to how do you make this contact frictionless? How do we take all of those points away from the consumer? So in fact, they're either coming to us for experiential enjoyment retail, or they're really looking for that simplistic, easy access. So that impatient consumer, millennial, has now got even more impatient, in particular with our Gen Z. So as a retailer, thinking, well, how do we take those friction points away from them?
As a retailer, does your offer fundamentally serve time well for a customer? It's experiential, or does it save time? I can get to you at 11 o'clock at night. I touched on this briefly, but we'll start to see, and we're already seeing robotics in warehouses. We're starting to see naturally much more use of AI, thinking about technology and the integration with the human experience, both at customer facing and of course, right through the value chain. I kind of like this. I talked earlier about we're increasingly trying not to talk about channels, and the channels are an internal mechanism, because we've grown up through silos, and the way we've taken on online, the way we've taken on physical, is we've siloed our thinking and we've siloed our organizations. But customers want omnipresent. Omnipresent means unified e-commerce systems, ability to track product, people, simultaneously, seamlessly, in real time. For many retailers, that presents the opportunity and the challenge.
And I think this next trend really speaks well to how consumers use time. So understanding that time well spent versus time well saved. And as a retailer and a brand, where do you sit in this scope? Really looking at more for that experiential retail. What can we bring in store when you're shopping? What can we do in that physical store experience page and create an experience? But in the same as Brian says, it's all one channel. So how do we then make that online? How do we create this interactive experience for our consumers? We know now we need to give them a reason to get out of bed and to leave the house, and it's got to be a good reason. So how do we create this experiential shopping?
When we know there's three distinct stages. There's the pre-purchase, that's on social media, online. It's the main visitation court to retailers now. When I come into the shop, it's the experiential consumption of it, if you like. And then if you think about what your post experience is for your customer, when I leave your shop, when I leave your site, how do you keep in touch with me? How do you keep me loyal? How do you bring me back? How do you shorten the purchase cycle? These are all questions for retailers to contemplate. I think, we're seeing this disintermediation of supply channels. We're seeing suppliers doing direct to consumer models. We're seeing dropship. We're seeing all sorts of technology fueled enablement. And so ultimately we have to think about our value chain and where we get efficiencies in supply chains and a of competitors.
The next trends has been around for a while. So we talk about these as our 2023 trends. Some of them have been around from 2022, and one of these is the rise of the branded offer. So we know how important the brand is for a consumer, but actually even more so now because they do want to connect with the brand and they want to connect emotionally. So we know that 95% of all decisions are made through the emotions. So as a brand now, to be able to stand out amongst the competition, very much in this transaction space, to not have to play on price. It is about that branded offer. And that means all of those branded touch points. Are we talking about all the touch points in the same language? Have we got this offer that will draw customers to us rather than us having to push our product down to customers? Because that is when we play on price. So if we can create this emotional brand, an emotional connection with the brand as well, people get our loyal customers. And we now know, word of mouth, brand advocacy is so strong. It's one of the top reasons that we see in all of our consumer research as to why customers will first interact with the brand.
The rise of marketplaces, online marketplaces, is an indicator of this. When you see Bunnings, Woolworths, and so forth that have this invitation to cost increase, halo effect, effectively, and that's trust in the brand. Ultimately, that's trust in the brand. That brand has the capability to so they haven't traditionally carried online. So that's an example.
We now move to what we've termed the customer loyalty loop. So this used to be, the customer journey, and it was start to finish. We actually now need to think of this as more of a loop. Our customers are constantly with us. They're constantly at some part of that journey and that circle. Also, it's different for every consumer. So it's understanding who that consumer is and at what part of that loop they're at, and therefore what do we speak to be? How do we speak to them? So really digging into this loyalty loop, keep them loyal. I think as we see budgets tighten, it's the importance of this loyalty. Get this into us more frequently. How do we get them to spend? So looking at what is keeping them to us as a brand.
Well, of course, we're moving increasingly historically from random research, personalization. Technology allows prediction, and we'll see much more prediction fueled by AI, and we'll see much more subscription type retail. And when you start to think about that, you start to think about initiating the purchase. Again, traditionally, it's consumers initiating the purchase, ideally aided by staff and so forth. Now we'll move to a space where we're able to initiate the purchase for the consumer. And that changes one of the dynamics.
As Brian touched on, the next trend is around this sort of, we now know about 50% of consumers have actually purchased through social media. And we know that around 95% of that key 25 to 34 millennial are using social media to interact with retail. So that was 95. So the importance of these channels, we all know. I think one of the key things here is there are now so many channels. Understanding what is the right channel for your brand and for your consumer, and one who knows me, I do speak a lot on consumer behavior, consumer insights. What is the right channel and social media for your consumer if we know that 95% of them are there talking to us through that methodology? And privacy. So this is obviously with the data breaches at the end of last year, we won't mention any names, become top of consumers' minds. Have this in all of our research, but as much more important, we obviously know the rules are changing and the importance of first-party data. So I think it's now that thing of how we're using our first-party data, but more importantly, how are we talking to our customers about how they use it? Again, around 50% of consumers say that they want to know how their data is used and they want to actually see that it is secure. So I think that is going to be something that retailers now are thinking about. How do we actually make it very clear to our consumers how we are using their data and why should they give it to us? It's the importance of us having that data now as we move forwards the new algorithms and everything. So I think that's something that really needs to be top of mind.
No surprise from us that we're going to talk about neuroscience, neuromarketing, what was over the years of really been behind this whole understanding of the human brain. And retailers are getting savvier at looking at the psychology of the brand, why we buy the limbic model. And we understand that, we certainly understand the power of understanding emotional drivers, who those segments are, and it addresses the why. A lot of retailers will present data that's a lot of the how, the historical, but the key is to add to it the why. Once you capture, you start to drive to brand essence.
Exactly, and I think again, I'm a big advocate here. Understanding your consumers, why they come to you, can help you predict what you're going to do next. And then now we've got this fantastic transactional data as well. So we're doing work on coupling that transactional data, what they're doing, the understanding their brains, their personalities, the why they're doing it, and then the where, asking them those questions, that classic consumer research, but coupling with the new technology we've now got available, gives us this full picture of who is your customer, why are they coming to you, why are they going to competitors, and it's going to become more and more important, as we say, as things as we see this constraint, understanding how we can really appeal to that 95% that emotional brain.
Many years ago, I talked to a Thai retailer and I asked him what his core market was, and he said, anyone with a neck. And I think those days are past. It's getting very, very alert and accurate. Anastasia.
Final one, we couldn't obviously say that sustainability is not a trend. It's obviously on there as one of our trends. It has been for a few years. We did see a slight dip back in 2020, 2024 during the height of the pandemic. But what we're seeing now, and again, is a hygiene. So I've said this a few times. It is a hygiene factor. We can't hide away from it anymore. Consumers expect to see sustainability on some form or another. They're linking with their retailers. And we know that around 50% simply walk past a retailer. And what are 50% today? I'm telling you that's the research that I've seen. They will walk past a retailer if they don't have some recognition of sustainable practices. So we all know it's there. It is a baseline now, and I think it's all about having the right sustainable and the communication factor as well to our consumers.
I'm going to whip through this, but when we work with clients, we typically look at this whole, I mean, not always, but we
The stats, I've mentioned quite a few do this, 25% do this to me, and more importantly, we actually bring this to life through your brand. So I want to talk about the different consumers we see. We've got our 7 different personalities, and we know that the entire population splits into around 7 different personality types. Everyone's got different drivers, and we'll have different portions of these personality types. But we can see we've got Patrick. He's a performer. He's driven by scared. It's all about So he's got a short attention span. He's busy. Get to the point, make it quick. Don't give him heaps of information because he's out the door before you've even said hello. So understanding the nuances of how Patrick wants to interact with you, and also understanding, well, which platforms is Patrick on? Well, Patrick's a YouTuber. He likes to get his information from YouTube because it's quick, it's easy, it's simple. So knowing these things helps us really focus where we spend our money and how we talk to Patrick. The other we've got Tony the traditionalist. He's your classic customer. Tony the wants to talk to staff members. In my club, you probably got a lot of traditionalists. Bunnings. Just want to talk to the staff. They want to spend all the time having that chat, having that discussion. So very important having the staff knowledge, having your staff with the ability to talk to Tony and give Tony the information. David the disciplined. This is me. I'm not David, but Anastasia the disciplined. I want the data. I want the numbers. I want the facts and figures. We've purchased any products. I've got an average. I've looked at the product information. I've compared the products. I've got a spreadsheet of my holidays. So everything is organized. I'm going to England. I have a guest in a few weeks. I have a spreadsheet down to that every half an hour where I'm going and what I'm doing. That's the disciplined in me. So if you come to me as a retailer, give me the numbers, give me the data. Allow me to research because that's what I want to do. And just one more, Helen the Harmonizer. She represents around 30% of Australia. She's one of the few personalities that is actually largely female. We see pretty much an even gender base. Even Patrick the performer, what's great to see is actually starting to move towards an even split between male and female. But Helen, she's after care, she's after community. She's very influenced by what else is doing. So if you've got a large proportion of Helens in your audience, well, it's all about social proof. It's all about word of mouth. It's all about referrals. It's all about making sure that she feels like she's part of the community. She's driven by oxytocin. She just wants a big hug. So if we understand that we've got Helens, how do we give her that, make her feel warm every time she comes into a brand? And we have it now. So I'm afraid I probably will have to jump through this today. But if you do want to see customer loyalty loop and how that differs by personalities, we do actually have download on our website. So our consumer 23 consumer trends, we'll go into this in a bit more detail. So rather than me spend a bit more time, we all want to hear Michael, please go and have a download on our website. You can get the whole pack talks about these consumer loyalty loops. Fantastic. Just a quick reminder, don't forget to take your client survey for us. We would love to hear today. Very much driven by data to help you make your decisions. Fantastic.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. Thanks, everyone. I'll take the opportunity now to introduce and welcome Michael Schneider to speak. Michael is the MD, CEO of Bunnings. Everyone knows Bunnings. Done an amazing job. I think I'm okay to say it's about a $16 billion business. Extraordinary business, expanding into categories, great understanding of their customer. Better to hear from Michael than myself. Welcome.
Thank you, Good morning, everyone. It is a real privilege to spend some time with this. I'll try and move through the slides because there's lots of interesting conversations still to come, and sure it's always really useful as well. But reflecting on in Brian's remarks is, you think about retail in the future. The first thing is you've got to be there. So if you're not doing the right things and you're not building and investing in your business, investing in your brand, it's not going to have an opportunity to participate in retail in the future. Bunnings is a 137-year-old business, started in 1896 by a couple of brothers that came out from England and started a timber mill on the west coast of Australia, and it's evolved through acquisitions and iteration and brand evolution over that period of time. And I think, when you sort of think things that make a business successful, trust is one of those. It's really, really important. If you're not investing in trust, so many slides as Brian and Anastasia went through that sort of talk about brand and halo and those sorts of things. And plus it's at the heart of it. When we think about that, for 17 years straight, Reader's Digest has awarded us the most trusted retail brand in a country. There's been a number of other awards for Roy and bit another. But you'll see little headlines up there that make us cringe every time we see them. And I think the reality is when you're operating in the public eye, you're open not only for business but judgment every single day. And you've got to bring your A game. You've got to make investments in what are going to drive long-term performance. Investment in trust is one of those, and I'll touch on that.
Another one that's really important is investment in your team. You know, I'm really privileged to be a part of an organisation that has close to 50 New Zealanders who call Bunnings home, a place that they put down roots and grow. And what is absolutely critical in that is that we are constantly investing in training and development. And you know, the point you made, Anastasia, about the fact that you know customers want to come in and engage with our team members, we've seen a real flood back to that post-pandemic. You know, we saw a real uptick in online participation. Our revenue in online went above 5% of sales for the first time at the height of the pandemic, driven very much by lockdowns in Victoria and New Zealand. These customers want to come and participate in the build and see us as a bit of a community hub, and I'll speak to community in a little while. But we spent, I think, you know, something like 6,400 hours investing in our leaders. And we've got 3,500 leaders across the Bunnings Group, leading small teams, big teams, and, you know, again, at an enterprise level as well. If you're not investing in that leadership development, the technical skills, the behavioural skills, you know, it's really hard to have the leaders that have the confidence to lead, to build strong teams around them, to invest in, you know, values like integrity and respect, to build strong teams, to drive teams to win, and give you the opportunity to innovate and grow your offer. Particularly, you've got to invest in team members as well. So I think in the last 12 months, it's something like 500,000 hours in product. What we understand, if you have the confidence in the knowledge if it's applied, how it can be thought about, then you can really bring to life the customer what they need to get the job done. We spend a lot of time out in our stores. We have a program which we call Hammer Time. We go out, we work in our stores, we work with our teammates, really understand what customers and team are saying. What's amazing is when you see deeply applied product knowledge, because it's not always about the sale. I just remember one time I was out doing Hammer Time in one of our stores, and I listened to an older team member, and we're really fortunate that, you know, close to a quarter of our team are aged over 50, bringing a lot of life skills into our business, often having spent first or a second career in a profession or on the tools. And I had this walking to a young mum, and the problem that she solved was how to stop sort of edge your way very slowly out of the bedroom because you just don't want maybe starts crying, there's your night gone. So, you know, the answer was, you know, dispatch partner to say, I need this product, it's WD something. Team member knew straight away, WD. Right? No, there's probably that sort of product before. Did me in terms of creating trust and creating a great service experience. He said, have you got olive oil or canola spray or cooking oil in your house? He said, absolutely. And he said, use that, it will do exactly the same job and it won't smell like petrol. So when your baby's in bed at night, you're not going to have that smell in the room that actually is irritant. Well, because it is absolutely an investment in trust. On our team member aprons, on many of our stores, in all of our advertising, you'll see that statement, lowest prices are just the beginning. So we've got to be able to deliver on that every single day. We back it up with a 10% price guarantee to make sure that if a customer does find a product that is a cheaper price, some equivalent item, we'll match it and beat it by 10%. We're really serious about it. Why? If we're going to have the lowest cost, backing up what you say so that customers understand that, and we invest significantly in research to make sure that we're on point and that our pricing policies align. And I think as we face into what's going to be very uncertain 18-24 months as interest rates continue to rise, that flight to value from consumers is going to be there, and that ability to position your business in a way where no matter what your proposition is, customer will believe in it and have faith in it is going to be incredibly critical. One of the things I love most about working at Bunnings is when someone comes up and says to you, where do you work? And I say, I work at Bunnings. The most common question I get asked isn't what job I do, it's what store I work in. I really like that because it speaks to the fact that the brand is sort of seen as a local participant in the community. You know, team members live in their local communities, they raise their families in their local communities, they teach their local schools. You know, we have team members that go out into the community, taking the things that we can do to support community groups out into schools and nursing homes and RSL clubs and you name it, we're there. We also bring communities into our store. And we've obviously got, you know, the world famous Bunnings barbecue, which raises between $20 and $30 million a year. And it's things like this that really do create the moment of I guess, testing the trust of our brand. I had the opportunity on Monday of being in Canberra speaking with the Federal Treasurer, and the first 5 minutes of the conversation was about his experience last Saturday cooking a barbecue for his daughter's netball club at our Browns Plains store. And he talked glowingly about the work that the store does in the community. And for everything we do, for the millions of dollars of advertising, all the training, everything else we do, it's those moments that matter when the rubber hits the road with your team members. It really speaks to whether or not you can have that trust in your brand, because it's in those moments when people test the proposition that you're either going to be found to be delivering on the promise or you're going to be found to be wanting. But it can't all be about trust. You also have to listen and innovate for your customers. And I think Brian and Anastasia did a fantastic job of sort of talking through, you know, some of the ways that organisations are doing that and sort of thinking about the future of not only retail, but the service proposition across the industry as well. One of the things that we've increasingly started to do is leverage real customer insight. Our marketing team created Bunnings Neighbourhood. Bunnings Neighbourhood is a panel of about 14,000 customers from every socioeconomic form of before, for us to actually talk to and listen to what's on the minds of our customers. You know, the most important thing for us is that Bunnings doesn't become a place that mum and dad go to shop. We've got to stay relevant to the next generation of customers. Can we play a leadership role when it comes to sustainability and environment around the home and for business? How can we make businesses through our B2B channel more successful, more profitable for them to operate, and to make everyone's home a better place to be, for home, a more secure home? We also doing things. So we want to make sure we're on point with the neighbourhood. Reasons why we were confident to go into our new pet category, and anyone that is curious. He doesn't like going to Bunnings. I'm to admit he doesn't like getting in the trolley, but he was happy to pose for a photo outside our Fairfield store in Melbourne the other week. But Bunnings Neighbourhood gave us the opportunity to actually test and listen and learn and really get permission from our customers to play into a new category. The ranging lens for Bunnings is everything from the fence in between. But we also know that we've got certain competencies to play in some areas: kitchen, bathroom, lighting, garden, all those. As we grow the market and grow our opportunity to participate, we want to be able to play into new categories, and tools like would give us that opportunity. They're also telling us that things like our Simple Savers program, which is the fact that well, so challenging. If you don't, and the idea of a store within a store concept is something that's not necessarily new, but it once you've heard it made it starting out, becoming more much So investment in in-store experience is critical. I touched on the training investment that we make. We focus very hard as well. We understand when the peak periods in our trading week are, unsurprisingly, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Fridays really emerge for us. Period. Friday, we're really seeing. And it goes beyond the servicing. To make our stores a more inclusive place to be. Our pipeline has been expensive for students to put in their pocket and go and start competing. Stickers, no one. To get people leave as quickly as possible. We work on the assumption that we will be, like we have been attacked in the past, the reality, you have good lines of defence for a reason. Think of us, anybody.
We've always concentrated these events, our leaders speaking on the practical and the implementation. That was an outstanding example. Michael, thank you very much. Very, very busy, so appreciate your time today. I just want to also introduce naturally our next speaker, who is Bernie Brookes. Bernie is chairman of Direct Group. Of course, many will know Bernie as his time as CEO of Myer. I also want to acknowledge Bernie because to me, Bernie's a bit of a rock star, and I'll give you a reason why. Bernie started supporting us, been a wonderful supporter of Retail Doctor, as was to Retail Doctor Group for many years. In 2008, can I share the story? In 2008, we put one of our first events on, and we had the Vibe Hotel down the road here. And about 4 o'clock the afternoon prior, I got a call that the sound system was broken down. I'm thinking, oh my God, what do we do? So I went to a mate who was playing in a band at about 10 o'clock that night and got this cranky old stereo system, amplifier, and I wheeled it in early in the morning. I don't know if you remember this, Bernie. I wheeled it in early in the morning like a roadie, hence the rock star piece. And Bernie did a great presentation, and this thing was held together with sellotape. So that's one of my memories of Bernie. And Bernie's continued to support and has done more for Retail Doctor Group than we have. Well, Bernie probably sticks.
Good morning. I don't get out very often now, so it's an absolute pleasure to be here. And more importantly, a pleasure to give you a bit of a view on a couple of things. Firstly, one of the reasons for coming today, apart from supporting the Retail Doctor Group, is to introduce the Marquee Retail Group, which is a business that's owned by myself and two other people in the room, being Anthony Carlo and Marianne Jones. When we returned from South Africa, we decided we weren't going to work for any more corporates, so we went on and started and bought our own business. So we bought one of those businesses, which is mentioned there, which is called a little business called Collar. Had at that stage 35 stores and was in a bit of trouble. So we purchased the business and we did something really smart. We opened 22 stores during COVID. So that took us to 57 stores. During that time, we've added 60% more stores and the turnover is up fourfold. So it's been a phenomenal success and a highly profitable business. And we just purchased another business in the last month, which is called Citi, which we've added into the Marquee Retail Group as well. So very fortunate to have good people that work for me. A bit corporate, but these guys certainly know how to run it and have done a great job. I thought I'd cover a little bit about Marquee, but also, one other point I would make is the little photo there happens to be MJ or Marianne's grandson. And one of the things we do is we use our staff in all of our ads, and we do that deliberately because the talent's very cheap. That's the only reason that we do it. And I'll talk a little bit about cost control a little bit later. Firstly, I think it's important to talk about where we've been very quickly, and then talk about where we are today, and talk about a couple of things for the next 12 months, and I'll specify why I've said 12 months. So firstly, if you think about the history of retail, there's a few grey hairs in the business. I think the only other person here that would know a little bit about this would be Gary Connell, who's probably as old as me. And on the basis of thinking about the history of retail, we're actually at the stage where you've got to think about self-service retail and before self-service retailing, which was service retail. And this was the guy that was the local corner store owner. He would know everybody in town. He would know who was going to split up at maths before the first episode. He would be incredibly knowledgeable about everything that happened in town. He'd know who was in trouble. He'd know whose kids were in trouble. And he was the local data expert. He knew a lot about a lot of people. A lot of things don't change. Some things become the same again. And the history of retail, you've got to remember, started as a service retail environment. Then I think one of the three sort of retail revolutions occurred, which was the concept of self-service retailing, largely started by BCC with John Berry, but also by Woolworths. And then from that, we naturally saw the development of shopping centres, the first one being areas like Roseland. So I can tell a little bit of history because I've got a lot of grey hair. But in talking through that, it's important to realise the disruption that we're seeing today is disruption that's been seen previously. So we've been through this fight before. We've been through the level of change that's occurred from a retail point of view. And then the one thing that people forget, which I think was the retail revolution, was the introduction of scanning in the late 80s. And scanning had an important part because everything we talk about in data today originated from the concept of barcodes and scanning and inventory management. And it changed the whole metabolism of retail, particularly during that 90s and the 2000s and the early 2000s. And then, of course, the World Wide Web, which has been a significant disruption as well. I think it's important to put things into perspective. As we go through a tough economic time at the moment, we've been there before. As we go through the changes in retail, we've been there before. The only difference is the level and the speed of that change and the constant state of flux that we find ourselves in. But it's not only a disruption in retail, it's a disruption in every other business. You can think of the local TAB that used to be here with the green signs, now that have disappeared with the odd one around. You think about the change in medical probably being one of the last bastions of the digital disruption that we'll see going forward. And you think about Airbnb and you think about Fairfax producing beautiful big printing presses only to find out that everybody moves to digital newspapers. And so we've already gone through and continue to go through such a change. But that change also reflects the way people work, the way they play, the habits they have, the things that they look for, and that enormous amount of disruption that occurs over a period of time in everything we do and everything we say. And there's some great examples looking at some of those cartoons of the way in which our world has changed and that constant state of flux that we've been in. So my first of only 3 or 4 comments that I'll make today are that what we're going through at the moment is not particularly unusual, and historically we've been through that change. It's just the level of change and the complication and the speed associated with it. Now, if you think for a moment about retailers and think about all of the impacts that we've had, I'll just go through the top 10, and this is what's happening today. Firstly, we've got, and still the continued impact of digitalisation and marketing as the impact of digitalisation that we're seeing. The second aspect is the thwarted consumer spending and that confidence, but also what we're starting to see now is a credit crunch. And I run an artificial intelligence company that does work for the banks, and we're starting to see an increase in recalcitrant debt, and we're starting to see some issues in availability of credit. We then got the other advantage, not often talked about, which is the lack of innovation and newness. And because of the lockdown and the close down that occurred due to COVID, that lack of newness that comes out of particularly the Northern Hemisphere has been very restricted over the last couple of years. People in China have been trying to keep their factories open, let alone developing new products. So what we're seeing is a lack of newness at the moment in both the Australian retail market, not only in food, but also in general merchandise. And I think that newness we underestimate does drive the propensity for people to purchase. We've got the issue of the cost of energy. I own a pub. If you ever want to see an electricity bill go up when you've got 20 poker machines in a pub, you can watch significantly the rise of power costs. And that's affecting 2 aspects. It's affecting personally, it's affecting the consumer. The second thing is affecting our cost of doing business. We've then got new legislation that I'll call, I'll add into the ESG. So ESG absolutely critical for the future of Australia. But the cost of implementation of ESG and the administration required is still quite significant. You've got to fill in a modest label, you've got to test your suppliers, you've got to go through and make sure. I mean, if you look at vegan, if you look at all of the aspects today that are critical, that ESG aspect is needed, but it also can be quite expensive and additional cost for retail. So bank rise now running at sort of 3.6% bank rate, with apps still increasing. And that's affecting consumers quite significantly. Everybody says a $1 million mortgage costs you an extra sort of $30,000 a year. And what people think, you've actually got to earn $60,000 to get $30,000 to pay that mortgage off. So it has a demonstrative effect as well. And of course, the supply chain interruptions. And although we've seen some easing in regard to some container costs and supply chain inputs, and particularly availability of stock, we're still seeing significant disruption in areas such as Europe and the Northern Hemisphere affecting key businesses as well. And I think the 1 or 2 aspects that comes even further that are people post-COVID. I did snicker at one of Michael's comments, and that is when he said that Friday is becoming an important day, shopping day at Bunnings, because people are working from home. They're supposed to be working from home, not shopping at Bunnings. And so comment is the whole world has changed. I was at a CO Institute group that I run the other day, and someone popped up and said, I'm never employing anybody under the age of 20. And I think there's no doubt that coming to grips with that post-COVID individual is becoming really important. So you think about all of the pressures listed in those 10 areas that we face today, and they're quite significant. And those 10 pressures add further fuel to what is already the enormous amount of disruption. The other concept to that is, where do you put your money from an eyeballs and ears point of view? It's a lot harder than it used to be when I first started in various divisions of Woolworths, and you were concentrating on whether you go to the Fairfax papers or the newspapers, the News Limited papers, which radio syndicated program you went to, and then you were trying to think about whether you use magazines, and of course whether it was 7 on or 10 free went to. So that's now look at this slide to see the enormous opportunities, but at the same time the money that can be wasted. And so the introduction of tech,
and the introduction of channel management in media also makes it probably much a challenge. Before I get on to some of the future, I just wanted to talk through the other significant change that's happened is the growth that's occurring in retail. And I think quite often people will say that the bricks and mortar retail are going to be in trouble forward. Well, Adrian and I were talking about the launch of Amazon in Australia. We were both in different roles, and everybody thought it was the end of the world. Amazon's coming. And Amazon's arrived, and they've done very well over a long period of time, and they're up to about $4 billion, but 16 billion. And you've got 40 million at Woolies, and you've got 40 million at Wesfarmers. So, and there's no doubt that it will play a role and continue to play a role. But the death of bricks and mortar has been significantly overstated. And when you look at where it's coming going forward, there's no doubt that inflation will drive some CPI growth, but you're going to get flat or maybe marginally negative. But it's not the significant metamorphosis that people spoke about when firstly the World Wide Web and businesses such as Amazon arrived. So my last slide today is perhaps leading with something. It's about the past, talks a little bit about the present. Let me now talk about the future. And I'm not going to talk about this is what you should do as a retailer over the next 5 years, because it'll be optimize the range, price, it'll be promotion, it'll be people, it'll be layout in the store, it'll be building omnipresent retail exposure. That's great. And I think any consultant can tell you that you're really in trouble. I'm just thinking about the next 12 months with all of those 10 factors as important from a retail perspective. The first is a greater scrutiny over your inventory. If you look at the results of all the major retailers that have occurred, they've got burgeoning inventory to be quantified. If you look at Kogan, if you look at reports, there's no doubt that they've all accelerated their inventory to compensate for the interruptions to supply chain. But inventory excess equals clearance and dumps. So effectively, it's about getting now before the consumer malice, which is not going to be a 3 to 5 year consumer downturn. It's a rocky road over the next, say, 6 to 12 months. The second is you've got to continue to optimize the range. Good retailers around the world have worked hard at optimizing their range, and that normally means reducing their range and eliminating SKU proliferation. There's no doubt that optimizing the range is going to be very, very important as part of that aspect. Third aspect is I'd encourage you as retailers to seek greater support from your suppliers. It's a tough environment for retail. So our job, is to put pressure on to make sure that they're contributing and they're supporting you. Effectively, they're helping you through this difficult stage. And the costs have come down in China. So you should be asking for better prices. And there are some efficiencies that have been occurring now with reduced container costs. So you should be asking for better prices. And I think the third aspect is the value focus. We are going to see a bit of a rebirth of the Aldis of the world, the discount operators. And there's no doubt that you've got to have that value focus. So top and not having a value opportunity is going to bring you undone over the next 12 months as consumers continue to look for value proposition more than they have. But also during this period to minimise your media and marketing channels. Spreading it across those 40 or 50 boxes that were on that screen will get you more of the same, will get you more of the same. Fragmented expenditure gets you fragmented results. So my view is that reduce the number of channels done well, whether it be through social media, whether it be through radio, depending on what it is you're trying to sell. You've got to demand more of your people post-COVID. My pub used to be really busy on Friday afternoon with everybody finishing work. That's now Thursday afternoon. It's the biggest trading day in the pub. Thursday afternoon's busy because they've all finished work on Thursday and they do bugger all on Friday. Oh, sorry, they work from home on Friday if they're not in Bunnings. So effectively, you've got to demand more of your people. And I think the concept of 3 days a week and 2 days a week, the balance between today's environment and today's environment of people and their demands is very hard. We all know, we all face it every day as retailers. My encouragement is you've got to demand more of those people because effectively you're paying them. It's a difficult time. Employment will get easier to find. The unemployment levels will step up and effectively the world will change. And some of the, let's call it the supply and demand will change, but also the power base will move back from the employee to the employer.
I think also the freshness or newness is going to be really important. I think one of the problems during COVID, and the Japanese have a phrase that they say the allure of comfort stifles the ability to innovate. And I think the allure of comfort of coming out of COVID and concentrating on just getting the supply chain right has effectively meant that that lack of newness is occurring. And when you pick up magazines, brochures, advertising, where you pick up social media, that lack of newness is very evident at the moment and will probably be for another couple of years. So you've got to re-image some of your existing products, take them in a new photograph, in a new use, if there's no new products available as well. But don't underestimate the value of newness in any retailer, regardless of the form in which they take. Continue to ask your customers. I have a saying that every time I get involved with or buy a business, and I remember when Anthony, MJ and I went to South Africa, years, the first thing we did was the most elaborate customer research program to understand. And when now we're going through with both Colette and TDE, understanding a lot more of our customers. You double down, you reduce cost, but you double down in two areas. You double down in your investment in people and recognition bonuses. And the second thing, you double down in customer research to understand it. The next 12 months is going to be a very difficult consumer environment. So therefore, you need to be testing, asking them, and getting feedback as well. And the last one, somewhat controversial, is make online profitable. And we're all supplementing the cost of freight with levies that are out there from Australia Post, finding it difficult with increased cost of distribution. We're all finding it difficult with cost of photography. We're all finding it very difficult. And not many retailers effectively measure the true, let's call it the true profitability of online retailing. And I think the thing, a la Kogan, a la Kinch, is that online retailing in its purest form is very difficult to make money. And most of us cover up the cost associated with online retail. And if it's 10 to 20% of your business, it's probably less profitable than your bricks and mortar environment. And a lot of people talk about the panacea of online being the growth going forward and online being the most profitable growth going forward. I'd like to continue my contrarian way in saying I don't think that's the case. We need to make online profitable. And to do that, it's a bit like the newness, it's a bit like postcode blues, it's a bit like opening. Sometimes you need to get a little contrarian. Hopefully I've given you a couple of food for thought. I know I've run through that pretty quickly, but it is about the now rather than talking about future of retail, and hopefully giving you some pointers to help your business as well. So thanks very much.
And can welcome back Michael and Bernie to come and join me for our questions. Now, we've got some questions that we will be asking. And then we will open up to the audience as well. So if you do have questions that you would like to ask, you're more than welcome. We'll let you ask them, no problems. And I'm afraid we do have to share mics, but I'm sure that'll be nice and easy. Fantastic. So thank you all very much. It's fitted together very nicely. You'd think we'd rehearse this. It all seemed to come together very well. So looking back at the COVID pandemic, what do you think are some of the key trends and insights that you think have come out of the pandemic, but will actually continue to be first and foremost for retail moving forward? So maybe if I start with Michael.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a few different things. I think Bernie covered quite a number in his presentation, which was really insightful. And for me, there's the things from a Bunnings point of view. There's clearly been a fundamental shift in the way that consumers think about their home. And I think that a lot of investment has now gone into people's homes. We are, love it or not love it, working at home more, and there's definitely a focus on sort of things around the home. And I think that also sort of speaks to the fact that when you reflect on Adrian's presentation, you have some level of optimism, or a good level of optimism around the housing market itself, because we've made such investments into that. I think the other piece is just the expectation of access and availability, and I think we've all had to learn very different ways to go to market over the last couple of years. And I think out of that forced necessity, we've all innovated and improved our offerings so that customers can participate with us whenever and wherever they want to.
Yeah, I'd only add a couple of other things. That is, firstly, we're seeing the rebirth of sort of localisation. And I think effectively,
Mike's doing a great job in the local Fairfield store, etc. And I think IGA is an example of have now sort of stopped their market share loss because of that localization. And I think consumers certainly have an expectation. Globalization, or let's call it anti-globalization, is starting to become very evident. And I think the other trend that quite, I'll say, surprised me is for years the large two food operators, Coles and Woolies, was regarded as the ogres. They were beat up on suppliers. They wrecked the supply chain. Fruit and veg guys feel market price of milk, and they were seen as sort of ogres. I think one of the significant changes that occurred during COVID is they were seen for what they are, which is responsible retailers that tried to keep the supply lines up, that made the stores available, that restricted the way in which their stores were interfaced with, and they did more deliveries and tried to look after the customer. And I think they went from a sort of in the naughty corner, should be, which is both trusted retailers, and I think that was the other change that's occurred.
I'll just be quick. One of the things we've looked at is the time spent at home, so the home office. We've looked at that office that was spent during COVID. That's going to lead. So eventually, you think of your home monitor or your peripherals, all that kind of stuff. That will have to be replaced probably in 3 or 4 years. And there's going to be an ongoing demand here for the likes of the electrical retailers and I guess home office.
And I think we're right. I think everyone's really touched on consumers' priorities have changed. The way they live has fundamentally changed. The value of the home and the community and that sustainability, that localization. People want to support their local community and they want to be part of that. And we're seeing that a lot in our research. And I think that means that retail has had to adapt to these shifting consumer needs. They want to be at home. They want to spend time with friends. They no longer want to spend hours searching for products because they value the time. So I think that is definitely a big shift that is impacting on retail. Michael, what do you see as the next stage of growth in Bunnings? We talked about pets. What do you think is the next step on the journey?
Well, I think, you're not growing, you're really cool about that in terms of that commitment and investment in network growth. So 5 years ago, we sort of, exited our investment into the UK and had to stop, where are we going to find growth? Because we want to grow in the existing markets. We think our commercial growth. One would see our revenue in our commercial business from sub 20% to close to 40%, pursuing acquisition. So we can see there, but you don't want to take the foot off any part of the business either in terms of acceleration and growth. So we're going to think about it as grow the market, grow and participate in that. So, expansion into the pet category is a good example of that. We've also done scouring storage, we've done it across kitchen, we've done it across plumbing. So we do see those natural adjacencies, and I think in my remarks I talk about the fact that we have this sense of front gate to back fence. So we will continue to sort of look through that, see where we can bring value, improve competition, and make things better for customers, and make sure we continue to grow both the consumer side and the B2B side.
Bernie, if I can I say, what do you expect from department stores? One of your areas of speciality.
So I think if you go back let's say 5 to 6 years ago, department stores in Australia were doing about $5 billion in turnover with 100 stores. Today, they've still got between 95 and 100 stores and are doing $4 billion in turnover combined. And I think that says it all about the continued death by 1,000 cuts, largely because of the legacy of leases. And I think the fact that they invested very heavily in becoming mini shopping centres with no reliance on concessions that restricts your margin and doesn't give you the opportunity for growth. And the concept of owning a brand, which was the department store, but with a la Selfridges, I think has changed quite significantly. So I think both the department stores will continue to, I'll use this phrase, meander along, maybe marginally improve profits, reduce the store footprint. But I think both of them have done an improving job online, and they have got high degree of trust, and I think full credit to the way in which they've both driven that business, and that will probably be their second. There is a place for them, but I think the world has changed. If you look at around the world, Neiman Marcus, Macy's, Debenhams, there's a lot of them that have gone through the same degree of rationalisation. What we broke, the rationalisation. If you map anywhere around the world, the number of department stores there were 25 years ago, and rationalisation of department stores in both brand names and store numbers has been the last 25 years.
And I think you're right on that thing too, is that it's now rather than the concessions, it's about the brand. And I always tell people about this, that's it's fantastic British. It's all about the brand. There's no branded products in there. It's the Marks Spencer brand and the famous Percy Pigs. So that's a fantastic example. Adrian, how about particular categories that you expect to see some growth in over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, look, we expect supermarkets to still be quite strong. They're going to be benefiting from population growth. So there's a large increase in migration forecast for this year. Also, if I think of some of the other categories, we think sports, auto, those kind of categories are going to be quite. We've shown historically, so those are super retails brands. They have very low correlation or no correlation to non-food retail sales growth, so they're fairly non-cyclical, and also, of course, benefiting from more time at home, more participation, that kind of thing.
I think that's it. How it's just a talent, they're looking for enjoyment and experiences, and that's categories get on well. Michael, can I come back still on the growth? We expect growth. You touched on the Bunnings marketplace. So how do you think
I think there's marketplaces and there's marketplaces really, and it's going to come down to relevance. And it's what's the purpose of a marketplace and why does it exist? And I think we've certainly seen a couple of different marketplaces really struggle, and I think that ability to be integrated into something else. And see that's why we see good growth in the Bunnings marketplace, because it's linked to it's a core website. I think it's within retail websites, Australian Bunnings websites, the fourth or fifth most visited. So it's right up there. So you've actually this enormous amount of traffic going through your core proposition, and there's a value add. I think places that are purely a destination in their own right, in the next little while, I think are going to face some struggle, particularly if they're playing in categories where to Adrian's comments, you wouldn't actually see anything growth coming in the next little while.
Fantastic. And Adrian, you did that good a presentation. I think you've answered the next question already. It's fantastic. Potentially for everybody, if there's anything you want to add, we're seeing the inflationary pressures. We are seeing consumer confidence start to dip. It's been very confident for the last sort of 2 years, surprisingly. Kind of what do you think will be the next steps with the consumer confidence, and how will it really, what are you changing within the businesses? So maybe Adrian, starting with, how do you see that consumer confidence and the impact?
Yeah, it's funny. We got a lot of questions about consumer confidence. Look, it's been in the toilet really for what 6 to 9 months, and really it hasn't impacted retail sales. We've shown actually in some of our research that it actually has very low correlation to retail sales. So I actually think it will eventually improve, and I think it's very much obviously related to the view on interest rates. One of the things we track actually is there's a question in the Westpac Consumer Sentiment that asks us about house price expectations. And that actually jumped 27 points in December. And that was at around the time that the RBA looked like that they were probably getting towards the end of their hiking cycle. So it has pulled back a little bit since then, but I think that's one thing to watch. One of the interesting things about that is when we plot that question against house prices, if you lag it by 6 months, there's actually a very strong correlation, 60% plus correlation. So that's suggesting that in the next 6 months or so, house prices may be stabilizing from here. And when we look at like drivers of retail spending, house prices is one of the 3 key things we look at. So if that looks like it's stabilizing, that's going to be a positive as well. So yeah, it just comes back to my view that there's a lot of one-sided reporting on things, obviously to spook consumers, but it's not all bad.
I think a couple of other areas that are going to become critical. I think just staying away from the financials at the moment, which Adrian's explained well. I think that there's probably 2 other things that I think are worth questioning from a consumer point of view going forward. The first is the it's a new thing. I'm yet to see the reality of how the windows will convert into a commercial transaction-based retail operation. I think it's public relations exercise, but it's been sold in the wrong way. I think the second aspect from a consumer point of view is they can become more wary, just as we have with privacy laws, just as the consumers are very concerned about data and the use of artificial intelligence that goes with that. We're going to see them become a lot more skeptical of social media. I think we're starting to see it today. The days of paying an Instagram or a Facebook influencer with a product to it's people see through that today. They'd much rather see the genuine nature of Harry wearing a Bunnings hat on stage compared to the fact that some product placement with somebody that's never used the product before, there might be a good looking guy or a good looking girl on social media. I think that's going to die a death fairly quickly, as the same way that people have localized and look for genuine, they look for genuine in social media as well.
Yeah, you see, that it's about the word of mouth, it's about the friends and family talking about it. It's not so much that influencer anymore. I think we have. No, fantastic. Bernie, a question for you as an investor. What do you actually look for in a retail acquisition? What are some of the key things?
So under quite a few of them over the years, you've got to get the price right. So before buying the two companies that we just purchased, I was the underbidder 3 times. So don't get me wrong, you've got to make sure the price is right. The second thing, you've got to have a distinct competitive advantage. That competitive advantage in Colette is a vegan product that is bag and jewellery. Our offer in Citi is a beautiful leather monogrammed product for home and office and gift giving. And I think they both sit in two different markets, and therefore they've got a delineation between other products in the market. And that's important no matter whether you're buying food company. Another one I'm involved in is Birch and Waite. And Birch and Waite has beautiful condiments and accessories, very different to what's in the craft sort of market as we talk about it. And I think so. You've got to have that next aspect, which is the something that has a competitive advantage or a delineation. I think the third thing is you've got to have a management team ready to go. That first day one from trying to save your brand or direct it, you've got to have a management team. And fortunately, I've built that sort of management team. And I think the other part that's important is you've got to be able to think, how can I influence this brand in two important ways? And the two important ways are firstly, one, by getting a better quality people, and two, by the speed at which you do things. And retail is about the quality of the people and the speed at which you do things. So if you can take something that you want to acquire and put those two adjectives before it, I think you'll find that you'll get a very nice adjectival phrase as you go forward to develop a business.
And I think that sort of quality leads me quite nicely in the next question, because we've heard it for the last 12 months, shortage of skills. It's one of the biggest issues in retail, and we've been saying that for quite a while. But what do we think the skills that are needed to have quality people? What do we think is the target, Michael?
Yeah, look, I think you talked about being contrarian before. I think Bunnings have really contrarian. We have a very biased permanent team. So 75+% of Bunnings team members are permanent, so permanent part-time or full-time, which is unusual in retail. We have a strong disposition towards older team members, leveraging people with experience. And we focus a lot on retention. So, in that high permanent participation rate, we get very high retention rates, certainly. It's not churning team. And I think sometimes we forget that. That's one in terms of recruitment and training costs, but it's also in the revenue benefits that flow from people that are confident in selling the product. And you have to pay well. You have to really invest. I know you talked about that during your presentation. We pay, I think, Australian enterprise agreement, about $100 million a year above what we do on a payroll on billions of dollars. It's relative to the size of the payroll, but you have to pay well. If you do that, people will put their roots up, they start the organisation. I think, in a period where it's harder to attract talent. And it's not in the obvious places for sure. Technology roles, those sorts of things are hard, but it's pretty hard recruiting forklift drivers at the moment as well. So, it's right across the spread. 2 or 3 years ago, if we advertised a role of Bunnings, 200 to 300 people would apply for one.
that's 20 or 30 today. That's still, a bit of a first world problem, I know, for some businesses, but it does speak to the fact that the employment market is scarce. Australia did a really good job of scaring the rest of the world off coming to Australia for a couple of years, and that legacy is still there for elements that's traveled forward. So, we've got a lot of work to do on skill migration, and that's flowing out into other areas. I think that there's a lot of work got to be done on, pushing students, particularly female students, into STEM programs, so that we see people going into data science and those categories. But equally we've got to rethink our educational pathways so that, it's okay to leave school before year 12 and go and pursue a trade. Because there's massive skill shortage in those areas, and for a business like ours, we see those things actually being quite significant as an employment challenge.
I think Michael's 100% right. The sort of mandatory is you've got to get the salary right and the grade right, etc. And I think if I take when there's a difference between owning a company and being a corporate employee, because you've got layers of management, you've got salary scales, you've got comparables, you've got all those things that you've got to adhere to. I think when you effectively own a company and it's your money, you have a very different philosophy on how you adopt people. And I think there's now, if you assume that financially or the money wise, there's a mandatory point of entry, you then got to think about what you can do to make yours a preferred place to work to attract those people. So if I just take the Colette and TDE business, the people are allowed to bring their dogs to work. People are allowed to bring their children to work. We provide them with free skin cancer checks. We provide them with personal financial support. We provide them with advice on relationships. We provide them with paint and Pinot days. We provide them with risk and reward and recognition. So you can take that next step as to how do I make it a preferred place of work without trying to become one of the tech companies in the US, which makes it laissez-faire, which is great, but there's no control, and hence the significant reduction in staff they're encompassing now. And so I think you've got to make it at a point of difference, just as you would as a brand. And how do you make yours a preferred place to work? And that's worked well. The only sort of learning, I guess, is when people bring their dogs to work, they always seem to find one place on the carpet that they all want to share their worth with. And so, from time to time, but that's a very small cost relative to the retention of staff.
Maybe there's some deals to be had there between Bunnings and
Yeah.
really used to work. Yeah. And you have a lot of experience. We are a dog friendly office, and my dog likes to come in. My dog doesn't like people, so he's very good at scaring people out of the office, which I'm not sure is exactly what we're looking at.
You're probably scary with all your spreadsheets, though.
Fantastic. So I think at this point I would like to put out to audience. I've got a few more questions, but I think I don't want to run out of time. So if you do have a question, if you want to raise your hand, it's happy to run around with them. Tabby, can you leave your feet? Thank you. Letting it all around the ask. I must have to do that. So who would like to start with questions? If you could just introduce yourself as you ask the questions, that'd be great.
Hello, I've got a question for Michael. Mike from Retail Compliance. In 2007, Bunnings in New Zealand phased out plastic bags, and McDonald's has just phased out plastic toys in 2023. How do that's a big difference in time. How do you start that future focus comes to these long-term investments? At the moment, for example, Bunnings has got self-checkout trays, so you can walk into the store and check out, and then beat the most amount of teenagers on a daily basis. There might be a long way to pay out.
Taking boxes instead of plastics, so taking cardboard out, but it's also saving us a lot of money. So, I always think about these things to do them for the right reasons. Basically start the program. So we play surprising. Red t-shirts and things like that. Thinking through tons now of risky uniforms that are going into cushion stuff, those sorts of things. I think you want to do things before the right reason, not because the optics. I think in South East world, there's lots of virtue signaling all around the world. Strategy is about doing the right thing, culture is about doing the right thing. And I think if you are invested in things for the long term, you're finding those things that resonate with your community, or you're finding things that resonate with you. But you also have to go to something or it's problematic, then you need to be able to get out of that pretty quickly, as well. And you've got to make sure that, as we've seen with the supermarkets and plastic bags, you want to be able to make sure that you've understood the full consequence of what you're doing so that you are getting the desired outcome.
Next question. We've got a quiet audience today. All right. Oh, sorry. David.
You said the price and really just think the price of businesses like Pulse 360 from really any universe and retail media. How do you see that?
Look, I think it's a matter of choice, right? And this comes to what data are you collecting and how you choose to use it and the monetization of that data. I think for us, we've with our customers, I think there are, to Bernie's point earlier, there are places to put your media events than ever before. I think that as you seek to monetize, you want to be very, very careful, because the danger is that if customers think that data is being used in any exploitative way, that could be a challenge. I think the other piece, got really deep connections with supply, have strong and media investment agreement with them. So we want to make placing those bets. It's not something we're pursuing any time soon, but we do watch with interest how that market's evolving, and certainly that where eyeballs are going, particularly live is very hard, and you're left with very few options these days. Where you can put media spend, particularly in TV, where it's being viewed in a live fashion.
Thank you. But just one quick addition, and that is, I think if you look at diversified from being everyday low price, retail in the US to now moving into everything from provision of data services to consulting services to other retailers. It gets to the stage where the two food retailers are very well proliferated. There's not too many new environments that they can go to new places, so therefore they need to find other sources of income. It's extremely logical that they've got a large customer database, they have a large supply database that are spending money on media, and they have access to their stores and, in many cases, shopping centres around their stores that they can combine the three to provide a very, very good media offering. And I think that's going to be an important part of the future.
Fantastic. In the essence of time, we do need to wrap up, and everyone's got busy days to get on with. I've got one question for each panelist. What, if you summarise it to one key takeaway, what do you think is the one thing that we need to focus on for the next 12 months?
I think it's inventories, as Bernie was saying. Clearly, sales growth is going to slow or go backwards a bit. So just making sure the inventories are clean, that would be it.
I think as everybody gets focused on reducing costs, keeping issues with interest rates, ESG, all the things I mentioned, to me, the saviour has always been in retail onward, and that is retail's adding. So growth to me is going to be the common denominator for success in the next 12 months.
I certainly don't disagree with either of those points. The only piece I'd overlay is to make sure that you surrender value proposition and you go after that like about how to help. If you do that, you will get growth and you will solve inventory problems as well.
I think that's a fantastic conclusion, because customers are changing, and they've changed so quickly in the last 12 months, 6 months. So keeping that focus on understanding, listening to data. There's so much data out there. I'm sorry, I still can't say that. I'm still too British for that. There's still so much data out there, and really looking at how you can talk to those customers, how you can listen, and what's there. So fantastic. Thank you to all of our panelists, Michael, Bernie, Adrian. You've been fantastic. There's been a lot of information, a lot of data. I think we're all going to start the day exhausted from everything just taken in there, which is great. Thank you to everyone for coming. We do have some upcoming events. So our next big event is Australian Retail Innovators. So we now have our finalists in each category. It's the annual awards for the most innovative retailers in Australia. And then our finalists also get put forward to the global awards. So we're actually celebrating a few global winners that will be announced at the end. If you haven't got your tickets yet, it's on the Gold Coast. So it's a week-long retail celebration, and then there'll be the awards. And we have actually got quite a large schedule. This was our first one for the year. We're a bit slow for starters, but we do have events very similar to this with some fantastic speakers lined up for the next 2 months. You can get all the data on Retail Group website. Obviously, we are not an events business, but we just like to talk to CEOs. We think that the more we can share information, the more we can all from it. So, other than that, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, to Brian. Brian unfortunately had to dash to grab a plane, especially given the current issues in Melbourne, so he had to run to the airport. So he does apologise that he couldn't finish up. But we're always here, consumer insights, retail operations. Our training division offers training to retailers, whether it's on your own LMS, off-the-shelf training, squad training. So reach out to us. We'd love to speak to you all. I should see you at the next event. Thank you to our speakers.